Mitt Romney has the smartest ideas. I just have to share a couple with you. I'll give you a quick preview. Windows, ERs, and taxes. Okay, Windows first. This is from today's Los Angeles Times. You'll recall last Friday, in fact, I was on the air when it happened. Ann Romney's plane had smoke in the cockpit, in fact, in the entire plane, and they had to make an emergency landing. So Mitt Romney, this is in today's Los Angeles Times. I'm not making this up. This is not a Borowitz report. Mitt Romney says, and I quote, "I appreciate the fact that she's on the ground safe and sound, and I don't think she knows just how worried some of us were. When you have a fire on an aircraft, there's no place to go." Exactly. You can't find any oxygen from outside the aircraft to get in the aircraft because the windows don't open. I don't know why they don't do that. It's a real problem. So it's very dangerous. No, I'm serious. I'm not making this up. Andy Borowitz did not write this. And she was choking and rubbing her eyes. Fortunately, there was enough oxygen for the pilot and co-pilot to make a safe landing in Denver. She's safe and sound. Right. So we need to have windows in airplanes that you can roll down when there's a fire. That sounds really smart. Then over the weekend, he was on 60 Minutes every 4 years, going all the way back to, what was it, 64 or 68? Like, the Goldwater election or something, one of those early ones. Every 4 years, they've been doing this, special show, half hour with each of the two candidates. And last night they did Obama and Romney. And there was some fair amount of editing that I was not all that pleased with, on both sides, actually. But I thought one of the incredible moments was when Mitt Romney was asked about health care policy. And he's like, oh, everybody in America has health care. You get sick, you can go to the ER. Right. I mean, all over the internet. Over at ThomHartmann.com, on Democratic Underground, you name it. There are ER docs and nurses and people who work in healthcare and just average Americans who've been through it saying, no! Wait a minute. First of all, you can't get healthcare in an ER. You can get triage. You can get emergency care in an ER. But you can't get healthcare in an ER. If you walk into an ER and say, I think I have a lump in my breast, or, I've been feeling kind of crummy for the last 3 or 4 weeks and have this little kind of pain in my stomach. Could it be, pancreatic cancer like killed Steve Jobs? They're going to say, you're not bleeding. Get out of here. I mean, they might say it nicely. Or you might, if you're really lucky, you might get a doc who's got a few extra minutes who would, palpate that and say, you ought to see a doctor about that. But I'm not your doctor. I'm an emergency room doctor. We deal with emergencies. And finding cancer is not considered an emergency because they don't do surgery in the ER. But anyhow, Mitt Romney thinks that's our American wonderful. And he doesn't believe this. This is the amazing thing. He doesn't believe this because the argument that he made in Massachusetts to push Obamacare, the argument he made in Massachusetts was we need to get people out of the ERs. It's too expensive for the state. Because the state of Massachusetts was picking up the bill because of a law that was passed by Ronald Reagan that said that if a person presents themselves in an emergency room of any hospital that receives federal or state funds via federal funds, any hospital gets any federal funds, they have to accept that patient even if that person can't pay. That was Ronald Reagan's idea. Well, I guess it makes perfect sense that Romney still thinks that this is it. And then taxes. There's a certain tax rate that working Americans, people like you and me, that we pay. And I will confess I have a certain amount of capital gains income back, 20 years ago or so. I was on the road constantly. We owned an ad agency down in Atlanta, and I was doing all these workshops and seminars around the country. In fact, on my... it used to say it, on the Wikipedia page for me. I don't know what happened to it, but that I have trained over 400 of the Fortune 500 companies. And the way that came about is we used to own a company. Louise and I used to own a company called the Newsletter Factory. It's As far as I know, it's still in business in Atlanta. And we did these seminars, these $265 all-day, one-day seminars where you get like 50 people in a room and you teach them how to produce a newsletter. And you have, part of the day on how to write and part of the day on how to do headlines and all this kind of stuff. And big companies send their employees. And so we trained all kinds of people. And then a lot of companies also brought us in for private trainings and things like that. And it was me and 4 other people that we had, working with us, and we had a pretty good gig. It was a lot of fun. And I spent, I have 2 million miles on Delta Airlines just from about a 2.5-year period there when I was doing that. And I was constantly staying, we were constantly renting high-end hotels. Marriott had this deal where if you're a Marriott stockholder, you get a 10% discount. So I bought 1 share of Marriott stock. Now, here we are 20 years later. That 1 share of Marriott stock that I bought for $20, that probably saved me $4,000 or $5,000. And, they did away with that after a couple of years because they figured out people were doing what I was doing. And they still every year send me the prospectus and the voter pamphlet. And it's costing them a fortune. But my 1 share has split a couple of times. And it literally, it was a $20 investment. It's worth like $200 now. And so I get these dividend checks, 4.5 cents, 8 cents. And, I would only have to pay 15% income tax on it. In fact, I guess I do, because I do pay income tax, and so you have to pay on your capital gains. And so in any case, there's a certain tax rate that working Americans like you and I pay when we get salaries, and then there's a certain tax rate that people like Mitt Romney pay and that I pay on my 4 cents or maybe 15 or 20 cents a year worth of Marriott dividends. Most working Americans pay federal income taxes, and even those who earn so little they don't pay taxes are still, if their luck changes, subject to a top tax rate of 35%. So for working people, be they burger flippers or brain surgeons, federal income taxes start at 10% for those making around $17,000 a year, go all the way up to 35%, which kicks in after you start making about $400,000 a year. But for Mitt Romney and the Paris Hilton class, and people who own a lot of Marriott stock, they pay a different tax rate from the rate working people pay. Romney and Paris Hilton pay what's called the capital gains tax rate, or carried interest is a variation on that, which is how Romney does it. That's the rate applied to those Americans who don't earn a living making things with their hands or their minds, but instead make a living making money with money, or who just inherited a lot of money. And no matter how rich these Americans are or how much money they made off their investments, they all pay a top tax rate of 15%, equivalent to what a school bus driver making $35,000 a year pays. That's how Mitt Romney could make $20 million and pay just 14.1% in taxes. All thanks to this very special, super duper capital gains tax rate that pretty much only applies to rich people like Romney and Paris Hilton. If you think it's unfair that super rich people like Mitt Romney and Paris Hilton pay their federal income taxes at a special, much lower rate than working Americans, then you're not the only one. And in fact, this was a topic that Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes got into last night. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to play this clip for you as we dig into this a little deeper. This whole there is actually an element of Calvinism in this. Now, John Calvin himself, to the best of my knowledge, never actually preached that riches are the proof of God's blessing. But some people in his church really got into that for a while back, a couple hundred years ago. And it's widely perceived as a Calvinist notion that the rich are different from the rest of us because God loves them. And therefore, God organized a separate tax rate for them. I'll explain after the break. Yes, the Taxman has a special rate for you if you are, one of the Walton-heirs or Paris Hilton or Mitt Romney. Maximum 15%. Now, I don't know if the statistic is true. Saturday Night Live, which isn't, known for their fact-checking, but generally they get things right, oddly enough. Or maybe not oddly enough. Good comedy is usually based in reality. Saturday Night Live the other night, commented about how the average American pays 20% in federal income taxes. I don't know if that's the case or not, but Romney paid 14%. They did make the point, that's less than the restaurant charges you for 6 or more at the table, right? So anyhow, Romney pays this special tax rate that's only paid by people who own a lot of stock or who inherited a lot of money or who work in a very small number of jobs on Wall Street. You've got about a dozen people who earn over $1 billion a year on Wall Street who also pay this 15% income tax rate. Here was 60 Minutes' Scott Pelley asking Romney himself, and by the way, when Romney says, oh, that money's already been taxed at the corporate level, keep in mind, I get a paycheck, and I pay income taxes on it. Okay, so that money's taxed. So then I walk into the store across the street, and I buy a sandwich for lunch, and then the store takes that money that's already been taxed, and after they've paid all their expenses, there's some left over. They've got, that, and they distribute that as, well, they pay income tax on it, and they distribute it as a dividend, but it's been taxed twice. And before I got it, it came from somebody else who taxed. This whole thing of it's already been taxed is a canard. It's a phony baloney argument. You reach into your pocket and pull out $1. That dollar has probably been taxed. If that dollar was printed 30 years ago, it's probably been taxed 300 times. Maybe 400 times. Who knows? Every time it was used in commerce for anything other than food in many states, sales taxes were paid on it. So anyhow, Pelley asks Romney himself if it's fair that Romney pays a lower federal income tax rate by making his money with money than working class Americans like surgeons and rocket scientists and talk show hosts make. Here, take a look.
You made on your investments personally about $20 million last year, and you paid 14% in federal taxes. That's the capital gains rate. Is that fair to the guy who makes $50,000 and paid a higher rate than you did?
It is a low rate, and one of the reasons why the capital gains tax rate is lower is because capital has already been taxed once at the corporate level, as high as 35%.
So you think it is fair?
Yeah, I think it's the right way to encourage economic growth, to get people to invest, to start businesses, to put people to work.
Right. So Romney doesn't think it's unfair at all that he pays a lower tax rate than a bus driver. In fact, he goes a step further and says it's better for everyone if the Paris Hilton class pays a lower tax rate than the working class. You just heard him. Romney says him and Paris Hilton paying a lower tax rate is the best way to put Americans back to work. This is the same sort of scam that the extremely wealthy have been perpetrating on working people for centuries. As I mentioned before the break, it's the Calvinistic idea that those who are rich got that way because they were chosen by God as the special ones amongst us. And to compound the hustle, now Romney and his rich buddies are claiming that if we tax them at the same rate a surgeon pays, at 35% like everyone else, instead of the 15% capital gains rate paid for by banksters like Romney and heiresses like Paris Hilton, then the economy will suffer. But history and facts prove this point wrong. You see, the current capital gains tax rate of 15% is an historic low. The sub 20% capital gains tax rate has only been around in the last 10 years, thanks to the Bush tax cuts. And if anyone thinks the last 10 years of economic policy have been good for the economy and job creation, then I have a used Bush administration to sell them. On the other hand, back in the 90s, when capital gains taxes were nearly double what they are today, the economy did boom. Just like the economy boomed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s at an unprecedented rate, while the capital gains tax rate went above 30% and even as high as 40%. So Mitt Romney claiming that a low tax rate on the Paris Hilton class, which he belongs to, he did inherit $1 million from his father to get started, creates economic growth. It's just not true. Facts don't add up. In fact, it's just the opposite. Low capital gains taxes lead to economic ruin, wealth inequality, and a vanishing middle class. It's a scam. And it's one of the reasons why Elizabeth Warren was right at the DNC when she said that the game is rigged against the middle class.
People feel like the system is rigged against them. And here's the painful part. They're right. The system is rigged. Look around. Oil companies guzzle down billions in profits. Billionaires pay lower tax rates than their secretaries. And Wall Street CEOs, the same ones who wrecked our economy and destroyed millions of jobs, still strut around Congress, no shame, demanding favors, and acting like we should thank them. Does anyone here have a problem with that?
I think most of us do. Ronald freaking Reagan even had a problem with it. In 1986, he raised the capital gains tax rate, so it was the same as the rate paid by everyone else. And it wasn't just because the government needed revenue, although Reagan was on his way to accumulating more debt than every other president in history from Washington to Carter combined. But it was because Reagan thought it was immoral for a millionaire to pay a lower tax rate than a bus driver. Here he is.
We're going to close the unproductive tax loopholes that have allowed some of the truly wealthy to avoid paying their fair share. In theory, some of those loopholes were understandable, but in practice, they sometimes made it possible for millionaires to pay nothing, while a bus driver was paying 10% of his salary, and that's crazy. Do you think the millionaire ought to pay more in taxes than the bus driver, or less?
Yeah, but that's not the way Mitt Romney thinks. As a proud member of the Paris Hilton and bankster class, Romney's more than happy to keep pushing this myth about capital gains taxes. After all, there are plenty of Wall Street bankers depending on him. Warren Buffett said there is class warfare in this country, and his class is win.